Senior reporter Alex Heath is standing by with some Tinder news. Alex, great to have you here.
Great to be here. So we have some news on Tinder today that we reported. The company is now privately valued at least $10 billion by its parent company, Match Group, which, to put that into perspective, it was last valued in the summer of 2017 at $3 billion. So we're talking in less than 2 years. The value of this, which, should point out, Match Group itself is a public company. Tinder is a private subsidiary of Match Group. Now the business is worth at least $10 billion on $805 million in revenue that it did in 2018. Tinder's a rocket ship, and why this valuation is interesting is because Tinder is currently, and Match Group, currently in the middle of a pretty fierce lawsuit with a bunch of early Tinder executives, including the former CEO, Sean Rad, and the co-founders, who are suing Match Group and its parent company, IAC, for about $2 billion in what they say is unpaid stock compensation, because they are claiming that IAC and Match Group purposefully deflated the valuation of Tinder previously. So that $3 billion valuation, they're claiming that essentially IAC, quote, cooked the books to keep that valuation low so they didn't have to pay out these executives the stock they say they're compensated. Now we're seeing that valuation, roughly triple in less than 2 years based on independent valuation. Match Group hired some banks, they did a valuation of the business, and this was very recently completed, I'm told. And yeah, it's a big development, and it's one that I think people following this lawsuit, with potentially billions on the line, are following.
Well, I mean, it's crazy. Match Group's market cap in total is about $15 billion,
right,
and Tinder is just one of like a dozen of these titles. 67% of their market cap comes from Tinder?
Yes, and it's important. I think the reason the stock hasn't reacted very dramatically to this story today, I do think a lot of the modeling that has been done on Match already factored in that Tinder has probably, the value of Tinder has probably grown as it's made a lot more money. I mean, it more than doubled its revenue in 2018 on the back of the subscription product, Tinder Gold. So, it's already, the street has already realized that Tinder is the future of Match Group, and even really IAC. I mean, IAC owns Vimeo, they own Angie's List, they own a lot of different brands. Dotdash, but Tinder is the star, it's the crown jewel right now of their entire portfolio. We should say the chairman of IEC, Barry Diller, of course. So yeah, I mean, what this says to me is that Tinder is the future growth for Match Group, and Match Group's stock has been on a tear as well. When Tinder was last valued at $3 billion, Match Group's stock was about 200% lower than it is now.
Right.
So Match Group's valuation has risen as Tinder's valuation has risen. But this, this new valuation that has just happened for Tinder is a validation of that.
And to watch the growth is amazing, especially for a company. Match just went public in 2015. And I remember around that time, full disclosure, this was one of the IPOs that I worked on while I was at NASDAQ. And at the time, about 2 weeks going into the IPO, Sean Rad had actually done an interview, and all of the headlines around it was he knows how not to do a pre-IPO interview because it was so bad that ultimately Match didn't want to put him out there in front of a ton of people on the day of the IPO because of how scathing it was. And so ultimately, this litigation that is still ongoing, it sounds like this is going to have a lot more implications.
It's ongoing. I mean, Tinder has had such a messy background. We remember Whitney Wolfe Hurd, who's now the CEO of Bumble, leaving Tinder because of sexual, alleged sexual harassment. She took a settlement and left, started Bumble, and now basically all of the early executives of Tinder are all collectively suing their former employers, saying, "Look, like you owe us money that you promised us." And it's very complicated in terms of how these companies are merged, because Match is a public company owned by another public company. But this valuation of Tinder now, I think, adds in a very important, tick-tock to that lawsuit as it's ongoing.